You've heard of the Knights Templar, right? The warrior monks, the crusaders, the guardians of the Holy Grail. But what if I told you that wasn't their real story? What if their true legacy wasn't about faith, but about finance? What if they were the world's first multinational corporation, the first international bankers, and the first to learn the brutal lesson that when you get too big to fail, you become too big to exist? They were called the poor fellow soldiers of Christ. But there was nothing poor about them. Within just a century of their founding, the Knights Templar became the richest, most powerful, and most feared financial institution in medieval Europe. They didn't just fight wars, they financed them. They were the International Monetary Fund of the Middle Ages, but with swords and castles. Imagine this: you're a nobleman in England heading on crusade to Jerusalem, carrying a fortune in gold and silver across thousands of miles is a death sentence. Robbers, pirates, corrupt officials, rapt. Everyone wants a piece, so you don't. Instead, you walk into a Templar preceptory in London, deposit your gold, and receive a small coded piece of parchment. You travel light, with nothing but this note. When you arrive in Jerusalem, you walk into the Templar headquarters there, present your note, and they give you the exact amount of gold you deposited back in London. Sound familiar? It was a letter of credit, an international banking system, centuries before the Medici family or modern banks even existed. The Templars were trusted like no one else. Kings deposited their entire national treasuries with them for safekeeping. Nobles hid their family fortunes inside the impenetrable walls of Templar fortresses. They owned vast tracts of land across Europe, fleets of ships that dominated the Mediterranean trade routes, farms, vineyards, and mills. They were tax-exempt, answered only to the Pope, and had created a financial empire that stretched from Scotland to Syria. They were a state within a state, but richer and more efficient than any kingdom. But their incredible power and wealth held a fatal flaw. It wasn't greed or corruption, not in the way you might think. Their flaw was that they had lent an enormous amount of money to one single, very powerful man, King Philip IV of France. Philip, known as the Fair, was ambitious, ruthless, and chronically broke. He had emptied France's treasury fighting endless wars with England and living a lavish lifestyle. He had debased the currency, expelled the Jews and the Lombard bankers to seize their assets, but it was never enough. And his biggest, most imposing creditor was the Knights Templar, whose Paris temple served as the unofficial treasury of France. Every time he looked at their fortress, he wasn't just seeing a symbol of piety. He was seeing a bank that he owed an unpayable fortune. And so Philip did what desperate, powerful men have done throughout history. He decided on the easiest way to erase a debt: destroy the lender. He couldn't just default. The Templars were too powerful. He had to annihilate them, discredit them, and turn the entire world against them. He needed a story. The plan was brilliant in its cruelty and terrifying in its execution. On Friday, October 13th, 1307, a date that has been considered unlucky ever since, royal soldiers across France moved in unison. As dawn broke, they burst into every Templar commandery, castle, and farm under sealed orders from the king. Thousands of knights, from the highest-ranking commanders to the newest recruits, were arrested in a single, coordinated, nationwide strike. They were caught completely by surprise. Their alleged crime? Heresy, devil worship, spitting on the cross, denying Christ, engaging in obscene rituals, and worshipping a mysterious idol head called Baphomet. It was the perfect medieval propaganda campaign, a cocktail of accusations designed to shock, horrify, and turn public opinion against an order once seen as the very pinnacle of Christian virtue. Their real crime, of course, was being richer and more powerful than the king. What followed was 7 years of hell. The knights were thrown into dungeons and subjected to brutal torture. Medieval inquisitors were masters of their craft, using starvation, sleep deprivation, the rack, and fire to extract the confessions the king needed. Under unimaginable pain, many knights confessed to the bizarre charges. The stories were leaked, spreading like wildfire across Europe. The heroes of the Crusades were now seen as monsters and devil worshippers. The Pope, Clement V, was initially hesitant, but he was a Frenchman, effectively a political prisoner of King Philip. Under immense pressure, he buckled. He ordered all Templar knights across Christendom to be arrested and, in 1312, officially disbanded the entire order. Just like that, the world's first great financial empire, built over 2 centuries, was dissolved with the stroke of a pen. The final act of this tragedy played out in Paris in 1314. The Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, and his top commander, Geoffroy de Charnay, were brought before the public. After years of imprisonment, they recanted their forced confessions, proclaiming their innocence and the purity of the order. For King Philip, this was the final defiance. That same evening, they were taken to a small island in the Seine, tied to stakes, and slowly burned alive. As the flames licked higher, legend says that Jacques de Molay uttered a final chilling curse. He called out to his accusers, King Philip and Pope Clement, summoning them to meet him before God's judgment within the year. Eerily, the curse seemed to work. Pope Clement died just 1 month later from a sudden illness. King Philip died before the year was out from a stroke he suffered while hunting. History or legend, it was a terrifying end to a terrifying saga. But the biggest mystery wasn't the curse, it was the money. When the king's men seized the Templar treasuries, they found them almost empty. The vast, legendary fortune, the gold, the silver, the jewels, was gone. The Templar fleet, docked at La Rochelle, had also vanished just before the arrests. So, where did it all go? This question has fueled conspiracy theories for 700 years. Some say the treasure was smuggled out of Paris through secret tunnels and loaded onto their waiting ships. Others whisper it was hidden, and its location is encoded in the architecture of Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland. Did it sail to the New World, long before Columbus, to fund a new secret society? Was it the seed money for the Freemasons, or was it simply absorbed by other orders, like the Knights Hospitaller, and by the kings of Europe? We may never know for sure. But one thing is certain, the money didn't just disappear, it changed hands. Philip seized all the Templar lands and properties in France, solving his debt crisis overnight. And that's the real lesson of the Templars' fall. They weren't destroyed because they were evil. They were destroyed because they were successful. They became so wealthy and influential that they posed a threat to the established power of the monarchy. Their story is a timeless warning. When wealth and power become too concentrated, they become a target for the desperate and the ruthless. The system that builds you up can also be the one that tears you down. The Templars thought their piety, their mission, and their service to the Pope would protect them. They were wrong. In the end, it was their balance sheet that sealed their fate. Every empire, whether ancient or modern, financial or political, believes it's untouchable, right up until the moment the torches are lit and the mob comes for them. History doesn't repeat itself, but as Mark Twain supposedly said, it often rhymes, or maybe it just collects interest. Thanks for watching. If you want to explore more stories of how money and power have shaped our world, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. See you next time.